When we read these stories like this one from Mark 5, actually these two stories from Mark chapter 5, we can't help but feel good. I mean, these are great stories, these healing miracles of Jesus, where Jesus just touches someone, or they touch him, or he raises someone from the dead, and yeah, everybody's happy, and everybody goes away feeling good, and it's all great, and we read these stories and we say, why don't we experience that today? Why doesn't that happen to me? I mean, I gotta go to the doctor in the hospital, and they cut me open and take things out, and then it's all better. This would be a whole lot simpler. How many times do we think that? Yeah, it happened then, why doesn't it happen now? Well, as I was studying this week, I came across a question that somebody raised. And it was a question I hadn't thought about before, but I guarantee you when you hear this question, you'll say, well, duh. The answer to that is obvious. And if you don't think that, come and see me. We need to have a conversation about a few things. So the question is not, why not me? Why not today? The question when we read stories like this, do we think Jesus was telling the truth? Yeah, we all know that, right? Is there anybody that thinks Jesus was making this up? Was telling lies, wasn't saying what was true? No, we all know Jesus was telling the truth. We all know that what Jesus said was the absolute truth. So when we take that and we read what Jesus said in these stories, does it change our opinion of what we think of these stories? Does it change what we think about how Jesus was able to heal people? Keep that question in mind as we go through these stories this morning, these two stories. Was Jesus telling the truth? We begin with the first story, and actually it's the second story, but it's the first one that's completed, so we'll say it's the first story. This woman who's got this issue of blood, a menstruation period for 12 years. And yeah, the story is pretty simple. She came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. And do you really think it was all that simple? Do you think this massive crowd trying to get close to Jesus, wanting to hear what Jesus said, wanting to be near Jesus if he decided to heal someone, do you think they just got out of the way for this woman? Keep in mind, this was a woman who was unclean. This was a woman who was not allowed into the church. This is a woman who was not allowed to touch anyone else, for if she touched anyone else, they would be unclean. Or if anyone touched the chair that she happened to sit on, they would be unclean. And that meant they couldn't go to the synagogue for a weekend. So yeah, you didn't really want to get very close to this woman. But yet, have you ever been in a crowd and want to get closer to the front and people just get out of your way, right? No. So yeah, this woman had been like this for 12 years. She'd been suffering for 12 years, hadn't been able to go to church for 12 years, hadn't been able to be around anybody for 12 years. What's even more amazing is if you go back to Leviticus 15, where it's talking about this condition and the regulations concerning this condition. In verse 23, it starts talking about if a woman has this condition for more than the normal period, she will be unclean as long as she has the discharge. So this woman was unclean all this time and was going to be unclean as long as this continued. She'd spent all of her money, she'd spent all of her time. We don't read anything about any family trying to help her out. She's all by herself. She doesn't have any money. She doesn't have anything. She is at the point of total despair. And she hears about Jesus, and somehow she fights her way through the crowd. And she touches Jesus' cloak. Now, consider what all she had to do to get to this point, compared to what Jesus had to do to heal her. What exactly did Jesus do to heal her? Absolutely nothing. He didn't even know who had been healed. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched me? Who took this power from me? Who did I just heal?" What did Jesus do? Absolutely nothing. What did this woman do? Everything she possibly could do. And going back to our question, do we believe the words of Jesus? Look at what Jesus said to her in verse 34. "Daughter, your faith has healed you." This is what you did. Jesus isn't taking any credit. He didn't do anything. Why should he take any credit? Do we believe that? Do we believe this woman was healed simply because of her faith? And if so, what does that say about why we are not healed? Do we believe the words of Jesus? Then we come to the second story, the daughter of Jairus. Jairus is one of the synagogue leaders, an elected official, an important person, someone who is highly respected, someone that others thought a lot of. And as a synagogue leader, he probably had a pretty good relationship with the Pharisees. And we all know how the Pharisees and Jesus got along. So as a synagogue leader, Jairus coming to Jesus was saying, "I don't care what you Pharisees say, I believe this Jesus Christ." Jairus is risking everything that's important to him in his life at this time for his daughter. So he comes to Jesus, falls at his feet, and says, "I got a problem, I can't deal with it, I need your help." And Jesus says, "Okay, I'll go with you, I'll heal your daughter." So they start off, and then this woman comes along and interrupts everything with this other problem that she has to have taken care of right now. And Jesus stops his journey to Jairus' house to help out this woman. Now, in Mark, it's only a few verses. But one of the more interesting things is when Jesus had finished speaking, how long do you suppose this conversation was? Now, first off, Jesus had to figure out who did this, and then the woman came and told him the whole truth, the whole story, everything that had been involved in getting up to this point, and then Jesus, I'm sure, talked to her for quite a while. And we don't hear a word about what Jairus is doing during this time. Is Jairus just standing by patiently allowing Jesus to deal with this other woman while his daughter is all dying? And Jairus didn't know it at the time, but his daughter was dying. Because as soon as Jesus gets done with this woman, some people come to Jairus and say, "Man, sorry, your daughter's dead. You don't need to bother Jesus anymore. There's nothing he can do." In that moment, we can't imagine what Jairus felt like. But look at what Jesus says to him in this moment of grief, of despair, of not knowing what to do next. In verse 36, Jesus says, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." Don't be afraid. How can you not be afraid in a time like that? How can you believe? How can you not be mad at Jesus for interrupting his journey to your house to heal your daughter with this other woman who, wasn't nearly as important as your daughter? But notice what Jairus does when Jesus says, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Jairus takes Jesus and continues on to his house. Jairus could have said, "Well, this is over with, I don't need you anymore. Thanks a lot for nothing, Jesus." But no, Jairus says, "Okay, Jesus, I believe you could do it before, I believe you can do it now, let's go and see what happens." Jairus have any idea what's going to happen? No. But he believed the words of Jesus when Jesus said, just believe. What would have happened if Jairus had not believed Jesus at that time? What would have happened if Jairus would have said, well, yes, that's over with. We tried, but that didn't work. Go on your way, Jesus. I don't need you anymore. But Jairus didn't say that. He believed Jesus. And he continued doing what Jesus asked him to do. So how much faith do you have today? How much do you believe Jesus? In Matthew 17, verse 20, Jesus says, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. So which is easier, to move a mountain or to fight your way through this crowd of people that touch the cloak of Jesus? Which is easier, to move a mountain or to believe that Jesus can actually heal your daughter who was just pronounced dead? Do we believe the words of Jesus? Do we have enough faith to do what Jesus tells us to do? So we look at these stories and we ask, why not today? Maybe it has to do with our lack of faith. And I'm not going to stand up here today and tell you you're not healed because you don't have faith. Because I don't know how much faith you have, and I don't know how to measure faith or anything like that. But for me, as I read these stories and as I thought about this week, it soon became evident that it was not just a matter of saying we have faith. I believe you can do this, God, so I'm just going to sit back and let you do all this. Would this woman have been healed if that had been her attitude? Would Jairus' daughter have been healed if that had been the attitude of Jairus? What does it mean to live out our faith? For me, faith requires action. It's not just a matter of saying, yeah, I've got faith. Do we live like we have faith? Do we live like we expect Jesus to do what Jesus promised to do? You know, this woman and Jairus risked everything. Everything they had because of their faith. One of my favorite Bible stories ever is the crossing of the people of Israel into the nation of Israel. Crossing the Jordan River, which is a flood stage. God says, cool, okay, let's go through the river. And the river is flowing until the priests step into the water. They could have stood on that bank until eternity. And that river would have kept on flowing. But the moment they stepped in the water, the river stopped. And they walked across on dry ground. What are we willing to risk? What water are we willing to step into? Because God told us to step into that water. Now you look at these stories, had they not had faith, had they not acted on their faith, the story probably would have had a different ending. Look at our lives. What do we do when God asks us to do the impossible? Do we believe that God can do it? Sure we do. We all do. Just like, do we trust Jesus to speak the truth? Yeah. Do we act on it? Do we live it out? Do we step into the water? Because we have faith in our God. Please join me. Oh God, we read these stories and we're amazed by what you can do. But yet, then we realize you're still the same God today that you were then. Help us to see, oh God, where you have called us to step out in faith, where you have called us to take risks, where you have called us to demonstrate that we do believe that you can take care of things. And may you say to us, like you said to this woman, your faith has healed you. This I pray in the name of Jesus, your Son.